Well, thank you for joining us this morning for our AZ Coffee Talk on financial parity when considering separation or divorce. Our coffee talks are meant to offer timely expert education on divorce, family, and matrimonial law topics. These are free events and open to anyone who has an interest in learning more about the topics we offer. And we are recording this session, so we will send out a link to the video early next week. So also feel free to share that link with anyone you know at any time. And while we're waiting, we're just having some chit chat while we're waiting for other people to join. And we're just talking about how women are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and some of the things that we've discussed leading up to today is also how people's spending habits have changed during COVID-19. One of the things we're going to talk about later on in the webinar is how it's important to understand and track your expenses for purposes of knowing what your cost of living will be if you are looking to get separated or divorced. And so I know that my expenses have changed considerably since we've been in shutdown. And just interested to open it up to everyone else here, Stacy and Lauren and Julie, what have you guys seen personally in terms of your spending habits? Has it tracked with what you've been doing historically, or what's gone up and down?
For us, our spending has gone down dramatically.
Yeah.
We live in New York City, and there's no taxis, there's no Ubers, there's no more eating out or drinks with colleagues or friends, no soccer or, one-on-one, personal training. All these expenses have gone away. And yes, your nails, no nails, right? No nails. Haircut, not many of us have gotten a haircut. So yeah, it's been interesting. What about you, Lauren? Have you found a difference in your spending?
I can't believe how much money I spent going out to eat. Like, it has been shock. Yeah, that, and I think I've realized that was a huge, cost for me. And I obviously miss it so much, but my spending has gone down, substantially. I can't wait to get a manicure and pedicure. I don't mind paying for that, but it's interesting because I don't know that I will be able to go out and spend as much money as I did before eating and drinking. I think this has kind of given me some insight onto how much better of a position I can put myself in, financially, if I kind of cut down on that. Not to nothing. I'm ready to go back out and have, dinner with friends, and we have to get back out there and help the restaurant industry get back up to, but yeah, no, same thing. Cost, expenses down substantially. Yeah.
It has been an eye-opener. It really has been. Julie.
Yeah, no, it definitely has. I'm seeing that we have most of our attendees on now, so I think that we can probably get started. So Paige, I'm going to turn it back over to you because I know the time schedule.
Great. Well, in case you haven't yet formally met our team, let me start with some introductions. My name is Paige Zandri, and I'm joined by my partner, Lauren Artese. Together, we formed Artese Zandri PLLC, which is a boutique divorce, litigation, and mediation firm based in New York City. We're also joined by our wonderful Director of Operations, who makes all of this possible. Thank you, Julie Kauser, and our esteemed guest, Stacy Francis, who is the President and CEO of Francis Financial, which is a boutique wealth management firm that specializes in helping individuals find and maintain stable financial footing while undergoing various transitions in their lives, such as a separation or divorce. Stacy is also the founder of an incredible nonprofit called Savvy Ladies, which was founded to educate and empower women to take control of their finances. Savvy Ladies has helped over 20,000 women through free one-on-one financial counseling, workshops, and retreats. Stacy's credentials also include certified financial planner, certified divorce financial analyst, a divorce financial strategist, as well as a certified estate and trust specialist. So as you can see, we couldn't be any more honored to have Stacy join us this morning. And I'd like to just turn it over. Stacy, did I miss anything there in your background?
No, and I'm so happy to be here. particularly to talk about divorce, money, and finances, because they're all so interlinked. So I've got my drink. I'm ready for our coffee talk.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So I'm going to take it over from here. I serve as the moderator, everybody, and just a little bit of housekeeping to our attendees. We try to keep the conversation between us here that you see on the screen to about 30 minutes, but we know that questions are going to come up throughout the conversation. There is a Q&A down at the bottom of your screen that you should see. Please, at any time, pop in those questions. I will note them. I will either try to weave them in as we're discussing it, because maybe we already have it planned to address, or we will make sure that at the end we address your questions. So please, if you have any questions, please shoot them our way and we'll get them answered. So this is the topic that's very near and dear to my heart, is the ownership of money management and in your household. And you know, I'm excited to be talking about this. And so, you know, one of the things just personally that I want to kind of launch with, to go to Stacy first, is with the elephant in the room, the pandemic that's going on, you know, what have you seen in the past 3 months that you weren't seeing 8 or 9 months ago, just in general with people's finances?
Well, very much a change in spending. There's been a dramatic change in spending during this time, and they call it the Great Pause. But what's interesting is that a lot of people have used this time to really think about what's important to them, and also what's important regarding their spending. And it's interesting, Lauren shared earlier that, you know, you miss eating out, but you may not go back to eating out as much as you did, because you realize that we can live without it, and the increased financial security that you would have to be able to put some of those dollars put away. So I think that there's a lot of very difficult things about the situation, but I also think that there is a bright side where people are truly consciously thinking about their spending, which is really powerful and really important.
Yeah, it really is. I'm curious, Paige and Lauren, what are you seeing that you weren't seeing a number of months ago when you're talking to clients? Anything you want to add?
Well, we will say that, I will say that what we're having to do, and this is a little bit, you know, involving the fact that just access to the courts is limited, is that people are really having to talk to each other, and they're having to have those conversations themselves. And we often get involved with helping clients approach those conversations. And that has created an interesting dynamic for couples to either realize whether or not they can work something out without having an intermediary, or without having the courts as the intervening party, or whether they absolutely can't and they need to do something more dramatic right away. So it has really been sort of a
yeah, if I can expand on that, you know, there are, in terms of divorces, there's statutory, you know, law that says certain, you know, amounts of money are child support, certain amounts of money are spousal maintenance, spousal support, and that's based on your incomes. But right now, even though you're able to petition for modifications of child support, nobody's getting into a courtroom, like nobody's accessing the court. You know, the court has kind of send out messages that they're accepting non-essential matters, but at the same time, like getting before a judge is very, very difficult. You know, I know we talked about this on a previous coffee talk, but you know, Mary Kay Olsen, her divorce attorneys were able to file her case. So they're like, oh, the courts are open. Well, no, they were able to file the case, which means that she got an index number identifying her case, and it's docketed. She's not seeing a judge. She's not getting judicial intervention. You know, nobody really is, unless it's an emergency and it's essential. So in terms of figuring out what your finances are, what your monthly expenses are. You might have to go to your partner and say, this is what I can survive on for now, and work something out between the two of you. And that's a huge difference from before, when you had access to court. There was no reason to kind of work out numbers that were less than what you're legally entitled to. And now it's something that is having to be done so people can get by.
And I think actually that's a great segue into the next part of my next question, which is, there's obviously an opportunity here. I mean, you may want to get into a court, and maybe you were thinking about getting a divorce or separating, right? But there's a lot of preparation that goes into it to even get there. And maybe now is a great time, right, to use as a way to start preparing. So why don't we start with, and I'm going to open it up to all of you, and you can just kind of go one by one, but what are the key issues that people need to consider, especially if you are the non-moneyed spouse, which I would love, Paige, maybe you to define non-moneyed spouse, and then we'll go from there, what they should be thinking about right now. And then I know, Stacy, you can really address what they can do to take advantage of this time. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Yeah, so the non-money spouse really refers to the spouse that makes less money in the relationship. And it's usually so much less that you cannot support yourself without the contributions from your partner. So that's what we refer to. That's the language that we use, the terminology that we use when we're talking about spousal support, where the moneyed spouse, if you will, also when we're talking about paying for counsel fees, which I think is something we might talk about later on. But when you are referring to who's going to be responsible for spousal support, if that is an issue, if that is something that you'll need to discuss, it will be in terms of the moneyed spouse who will be responsible for spousal support to the non-moneyed spouse. So it doesn't mean that that person makes no money, but it typically means that they cannot support themselves without the financial contributions of the other. And you started off by saying, what are some of the things that people need to think about when they find themselves in this situation? If you are the non-moneyed spouse, you want to think about, ushering your cash flows or ushering the information that you'll need to understand what your income and what your expenses actually are. What is a true reflection of your income and your expenses? And that in itself can seem overwhelming, right? Because depending on how you divide those, how you run your household and how you manage it, whether or not you have a full understanding and a complete picture of those things is very much up in the air. And I think, Stacy, you work with clients quite a bit in trying to paint that full financial picture.
And it's more complicated now, Paige, I think, than ever, because the expenses that your household has is not going to be the expenses that you're going to have a year from now, or let's say a year ago. And so realistically, what you should be doing is going back to your credit card statements, your bank statements, checking statements, looking at Venmo for a year ago this time. Mm-hmm. Because if you are going to prepare for a separation and a divorce and create that budget, which is a must do, you need to use actual real information, because this depressed spending, while I fantasize in my life that I could go retire in Bali tomorrow if I keep this low spending, realistically, that's not happening. My spending is going to change. The world is going to open up. And particularly if you have children, those expensive add-ons, the extracurricular activities, the tutoring, the camps, the blah-de-blah-de-blah are going to come back with a roaring force. So I 100% agree with you, Paige, that this is a great opportunity to get your head around the spending number. And I'll be honest myself. I mean, I looked at my spending and it overwhelmed me. And if anything, I was, a little embarrassed. So realize that it's going to take you some time, and it's not always the most fun activity, but I do encourage a glass of wine. I only say one because two, your math will get bad. But exactly, try and chip away at it and use this time. Yeah. Lauren, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you really need to have an idea of what your spending is, because one of the things that happens when you separate is that you're no longer one household. You have two households. So both those households need to be supported, and you need to have enough income, to support that. So, and I think there's a difference between looking at essential expenses and non-essential expenses. And, you don't want your life to be diminished to the point where you don't have time, you don't have the funds to enjoy a night out, with with the children, which we all know can be very expensive. Going to the movies, doing things, recreational things can be expensive. So you want to put yourself in a position where you're like, all right, this is how much money I need to pay all my expenses that are necessary. And then so you can have some extra money, to do fun things. Because the courts consider that, the courts aren't going to want to put one party in a position where their necessary expenses are paid and they don't have any extra money for, non-essential and fun stuff. So there's no way to plan unless you plan ahead, unless you know what they are. So you got to just kind of buckle down and do it, even though, and I think the wine is a good idea, but one glass, I agree. Yeah.
As I'm listening to you, it's raising to me, sometimes the non-moneyed spouse doesn't actually even know where to begin. Like, where do I even start? How do I know I'm accessing everything that I need to access to get a full picture? How do I even broach that conversation? So I don't know, Stacy, do you have any advice or wise words that somebody can, it can be scary for that person.
Yeah.
So
yeah, particularly if you're not the person really in charge of the finances, it's hard to know, do you know everything? And one of the best things to do is to use this as an opportunity to have an open conversation with your spouse about your finances, because the vast majority of people on the face of this planet, their finances have changed dramatically. We've seen, stock market bouncing and huge volatility. That's the perfect opportunity to say, hey, what's going on with our retirement? What's going on with, our savings? What does it look like? And so that you can see and actually look at all of the different accounts that you have. It's also a great opportunity because for many people, unfortunately, their incomes have gone down or their job security is more uncertain. And that's another segue into, I really want to understand what our spending and our savings is, and what would happen if your income was reduced or if I'm let go. It's a great way to try and get on the same page of understanding the full financial picture. And knowing the full financial picture, and I know Lauren and Paige, you're going to back me up on this, the clients who have a better understanding of their finances typically fare better through the process because they're starting from a foundation of knowledge and information.
No, and I will say it also saves money because the process of discovering where the money comes from or where the money is going can be quite exhausting and expensive. And maybe we should spend a couple of minutes just talking about that. I would just want to add one point. Also, the fact that we're in a health crisis and it's very likely that we could endure a second wave. We had a previous coffee talk on shoring up your estate in the midst of a pandemic. And, one of the things that you might want to say to your partner is, look, God forbid if something were to happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to get into our bank account or what credit card accounts do we have, or where is the income, where is the income going?
Yeah.
And I think what's important for everybody to note is these are conversations, whether you're looking to have a divorce, get into a divorce or separated or not, these are conversations that you should be having in your household. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that all three of you would definitely, regardless of your situation, these are conversations that should be had. Right. So,
Julie, if I can just expand on that really quickly. One of, a lot of people, most people I would say don't want to get divorced. So one of the things that I would advise just in our experience as divorce attorneys, you know, finances is the number one reason that people end up ultimately getting divorced, because it's a huge source of stress. So even if you are not the breadwinner in your family dynamic, talking with your partner about finances and about how much money there is and what extras you can spend on will also relieve stress for your partner, who is feeling the, you know, financial responsibility for the family. You know, that's something that's important. You know, whenever I think we talk about prenuptial agreements and postnuptial agreements that are done early on in the marriage, that's important. You know, you want to have these open conversations about finances with your partner, and it will relieve and prevent, I think, conflict later on in the marriage. So I think, Julie, it's excellent advice to tell people to start talking about finances from the beginning. And if you haven't been, like, that's something that this is a good opportunity for you to set.
Well, and that goes right back to what Stacy was saying, is use this as the opportunity, use it as a segue to, what about, let's dig in, because we did in advance of this have a particular question about the hidden assets, you know, the fear that there are hidden assets. And Paige, you started to touch on it a little bit. What happens if you feel that there are some hidden assets, or maybe there's a family business where there's a lot of cash flowing back and forth and you're not really sure that everything is being divulged? What do you, I'm going to throw it back to all of you. Stacy, you can start. What do you do? How do you help to somebody uncover, and who needs to be in their camp to make that happen?
Well, getting more involved with the finances is one key, because one of the things you'll see is that if you see mouse droppings, there's probably a mouse somewhere, and you typically will see droppings, and you can look through your tax return and look at the 1099 interest form, and you'll see all of the bank accounts or accounts that are throwing off any type of interest. That tells you right there. You can also look to see on the capital and gains and losses section, they have all the accounts right there listed out for you. And then you can take a look at the front page. The front page of your tax return has areas where it shows retirement contributions or withdrawals. So, you know, these are some things that you can do yourself, but eventually if you have a spouse who is on purpose keeping you in the dark with the finances, it may make sense to get a forensic accountant. In particular, Julie, with that scenario where you have a cash business, where not all of the income generated from the business is being declared, and you've been essentially the out spouse and the knowledge around it. And you know, Paige and Lauren, I'm sure you'll agree, the challenge with forensic accountants, while they are fabulous, and they will hopefully get down to the bottom and discover, the process of doing so is time intensive and as a result expensive. So the more you can do, the more knowledge you have, the quicker and less expensive your divorce process is going to be.
Yeah, I would say, Lauren, sorry, didn't mean to just jump in. Was there anything you wanted to? I would say, like, in terms of getting clients getting involved to save money, one of the things that we often will try to suggest to clients is during the discovery process, where, you know, demands are made for disclosure of all financial documents. A lot of times we will encourage clients, when we get production of the documents, to actually go through the documents, because it can be at minimum 3 years worth of statements, right? And if you've got a couple of checking accounts, a couple savings accounts, retirement accounts, investment accounts, it becomes voluminous. And that for us takes hours and hours. So if clients, if clients want to save money, and they have the time and energy to get involved, that is a meaningful way for them to get involved, to get an understanding. They often have a way to, when they see something, have a way to provide context around it to tell us whether or not it is a red flag, and it does save us a lot of time and money. Yeah. But apart from that, you're absolutely right. You have to hire a forensic to do that trace work, and to find out, you know, to look for those outliers, and to find out, you know, okay, so I see a large withdrawal I see a large withdrawal from an account. Where did that money go? And then chase it. And then one of the things that I think Lauren will probably have comments is that if in terms of a cash business, if you've got either spouse who's got a closely held business, and whether there's a lot of cash receipts, what will often happen is that we have to do what's called like a standard of living analysis. So if the income does not support, the income being reported does not support the lifestyle that you are living, then income will be imputed. And whether or not that's the amount of income being imputed is the right amount or is the accurate amount, it's really sort of the next best thing you can do. And that is also a time consuming and sort of, an accounting, and everybody has their own approaches and everyone has a different way of seeing those things. So it's also something that is sort of the next best solution, but not an airtight solution.
Yeah. And I mean, that's pretty much the only way in terms of the cash, and unless you can establish, that the business, there's no real other way to establish that the business is making more money other than, there's no way that these bills could have been paid if there's more money coming in. I mean, that accounting is pretty much what you would do. And it's interesting because I was thinking about it as Paige was, talking about this. There are certain judges that if you've been signing tax returns for a certain amount of years, and now you're going to go back and say, well, that wasn't accurate. There's this one judge in particular who's a really fair jurist, and our firm always, feel it's pleasant to be in front of him and work with him to resolve these cases for our clients. But he's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have signed off on these tax returns for all these years, and now you're saying that the tax returns were all a lie. I mean, you always have I was, in the dark, but I think what has become the theme of this coffee talk, and it's great, is that the best thing to do is not be in the dark as early as possible, even if you're contemplating a divorce. And we've been talking about the cost effective reasons for doing that, and, the knowledge, the benefit of having that knowledge. It's also an emotional, kind of relief for you. Your divorce will be less emotionally draining on you if you know about things in advance. And I think that's a powerful tool to have in your pocket, and a powerful place to be coming from. So, and cash businesses are tough in divorces. It's a really hard, difficult thing. And obviously we have, brilliant people that we work with, and who are going to give the best advice on what to do and where to look, and the forensic come in, and they can find kind of hidden money. But I think, Stacy, what you had said about going through the tax returns, that's the smartest place to start. And it's,
great.
Everything's
great.
there,
And I never even thought of that. That's a great, I mean, like that's where you start, right? You start in your own tax return.
That's my favorite thing to do. And when you find something, I don't know, maybe I was a police officer in a former life or something, like when you find something that someone's done naughty, and unfortunately I was the little sister who always, told on my brother. So I guess maybe I've always been this way. But yeah, and I think what's important too, Lauren, is that, no one would show up to a marathon not having trained, right? You train and you prepare, and you are going to be on your own with your own finances. You're going to be 100% responsible for your own financial security. And so you need to get involved. You need to start to learn this, because eventually you're going to be a single person. I mean, that's why you're going through a divorce most likely. And, just giving that power up to another spouse down the line. As we talked about, money is the number one reason for divorce. Unfortunately, you could be setting yourself up for another marriage failure, and no one wants that.
Yeah. I want to shift gears just slightly, not big time, but just a little bit. But before I do, I just want to remind anybody who's a participant who may have joined late, if you have a question, please just pop it into the Q&A down at the bottom, and we will make sure to address it. So, all right. So we know you need to get involved in your finances. I think another thing that's coming up a lot during this time, though, is, okay, I've got a handle on my finances. I don't even know how I'm going to afford to get out of this unhappy place that I'm in. You know, everybody always talks about, and we've already kind of touched on it a little bit, divorces don't tend to be cheap events in your life.
Yeah.
And what can somebody do, whether they were mulling it over prior to this and not happy, or maybe this event that's been going on with the pandemic and social distancing and pause gave them some clarity, but now they don't have the money. What can they do? And so, Lauren, I'm going to have you start, and then you guys round robin it from there.
I know divorces are very expensive, and that's, I think, one of the things that holds people back from doing it, like from pulling the trigger when they really feel like they want to. You know, you could potentially try to save up some money, put it aside to pay for counsel fees. You also, the four of us has discussed this previously. You know, the joint checking account is a checking account that, you know, if you have access to a joint checking account, that's your money. So like, you know, you could pay your counsel fees from the joint checking account. I mean, I wouldn't empty a joint checking account to pay the fees, because if that's where you pay your expenses from, because obviously you need to still be able to pay your rent or your mortgage and your you know, necessary bills. So that's, you know, something that you could do. A lot of people take loans from family members in order to secure that initial retainer, and then you know, the attorneys that you hire to represent you can potentially do a motion for additional counsel fees. I mean, if you're the non-moneyed spouse, your partner is going to have to either pay your counsel fees or contribute to your counsel fees, depending on how, you know, high those fees go, depending on if it's a contested versus an uncontested. So it depends on your situation. And if you have a partner who you're going to be able to work it out with, even if it's a little contested in the beginning, that doesn't mean that you can't go down an uncontested route or a mediation route, which we would always recommend for any party, any, you know, client that can work it out between, you know, with their partner. We would always recommend that you do that, and that keeps the fees down. So, you know, it's definitely an overwhelming feeling to figure out where I'm going to get that money from. But, you know, and I would recommend reaching out to several different divorce attorneys, getting, you know, having consultations with, you know, a few, and getting an idea of who you can work with and what their hourly rates are, you know, and what the initial retainer is. And those are going to inform your decisions going forward, and how much you would need to take as a loan from a family member or a friend, or where you would get that money from. And I will tell you, a lot of divorce attorneys now take credit cards. So you can also pay the retainer through a credit card. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that, so please feel free.
Yeah, I think actually one of the things that you said that might sound puzzling for people to hear this from us, but it's great advice to talk to as many lawyers as you can. The fit of the person that you work with and that you hire as your attorney is critical. And our rates are extremely reasonable. And we are in some cases, we've dealt with some cases where, you know, the non-moneyed spouse has hired the most expensive lawyer they can find. And and that sometimes they may get advice that, as Lauren said, that, you know, there is a statute that provides that the moneyed spouse will be responsible for contributing at least to the non-money spouse's legal fees. We alluded to this earlier, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your entire legal bill will be paid for by your spouse. And if you hired the most expensive lawyer, you know, judges look at that. Judges look at the necessity for that. And so it's not always the best way forward for your case.
Yeah. Justice Cooper from Manhattan wrote a decision explicitly addressing that it's not a free-for-all. I mean, he said it much more eloquently in his decision, but, you know, exactly what Paige just said, going out as the non-moneyed spouse and hiring the most expensive attorney you can find does not guarantee that after a motion, the court is going to you know, order the moneyed spouse to pay that entire bill. And now you have a portion of this bill hanging over your head because you still owe the fees. Once the fees are earned, you owe them. So definitely this is a big, you know, going out and finding an attorney to represent you in a divorce is a big decision that you should put a lot of thought into and plan ahead for. And I think, again, back to the theme, like planning, you know, financially for, you know, your expenses and spending, and then also just for how to actually affect the divorce and commence the action. So yes,
it's interesting. So, what I'm seeing a lot of individuals who are coming to us, it very much reminds me of 2008 and 2009, where people were deer in the headlights, afraid to get a divorce because they didn't know if they could really afford a divorce. And we're seeing that right now. And it's interesting because one of the things we found towards the end of 2009 and 10, when people were able to kind of get themselves out of that place, is people coming to us to ask, can I afford to get a divorce? Can I afford to stay in the keep the Hamptons home? Can the kids still go to private school? And while we don't have all the answers, we can model out for them. And what's really powerful is that you don't have to have these questions circulate in your brain every single night before you go to bed, wondering, worrying. We can actually look at the numbers and help you make an informed decision. You know, realistically, if you're in an unhappy marriage, it doesn't matter what the finances are, get out. My grandmother stayed in an abusive marriage, and she was afraid to leave because of the finances, and she paid with her life and passed away. There's no reason to ever stay just because the finances, but realistically, that's something we worry about. And so getting the right matrimonial attorney on your side and actually looking at your financial picture and modeling that out can give such peace of mind to let you know what things might look like, and the fact that, you know, no matter what, we will make it work. We will make it work. Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna throw something out to each one of you that's come up since we were just chatting. We started, actually, before we went live, we were talking about getting involved. Why aren't women getting involved in their finances earlier? And as I'm listening to you, the three of you are professionals that could maybe impart some sage advice. We were talking about millennials in particular, Stacy. I don't know if you found the fact that
so
surprised to find, let me just set this up for a second. I'm going to turn it over. We were surprised to find that after 25 years of talking about this, that women are still not getting as involved in their finances as they should be. What should people be doing as they enter relationships that you see from a divorce? And I'm going like this because that's the way you guys are set up on my screen, to Paige and Lauren. Paige and Lauren, that you see from a divorce perspective that people could get into a conversation as they're entering serious relationships. And Stacy, from a money standpoint, I'm going to throw it out to each of you, and that's kind of where we'll wrap it up and turn it over to Q&A. So go ahead. Stacy, you start with this one.
So a UBS study just came out, and unfortunately, we think that it's the older generations of women are not taking control of their money. They found that millennial women, are the least engaged of all the generations in their money. So what that means is we've got to make some changes, and the Cinderella, the Prince Charming isn't coming. That's really important. When you're getting married, you'll talk about all sorts of things. Where do you want to live? Who you're spending Hanukkah or Christmas with, but we don't see people talking about their money, and that's where you have set yourself up for potentially a failure. I highly recommend financial date nights, doing that once a month, And my husband and I have been doing it religiously for nearly 20 years. And it has been the glue that has stuck us together in good times and bad. And we've gone through a lot of very difficult times financially. And we've also been very blessed. But that financial date night where once a month you're coming together without the children, you're talking about finances, where you're going on vacation, how are you feeling? Are you stressed? What can we do? How can we work together? I have to tell you, that is the glue that will stick your marriage together.
It's really great advice.
Yeah, that is an excellent advice. And it's like, I can't even imagine handing anything in my life completely over to somebody else, like any different type of, like financial decision making on where we're going to live. Like I could never even imagine doing that. I'm too much of a control freak in my personality. So, but I would actually, I think, enjoy a financial date night because I like figuring out, how much money I'm making, how much money I'm saving, like where I'm going to put it. It's something that I enjoy. So that sounds great to me. But for, the women out there who feel, and I think this is where it's coming from in turning it all over, financial responsibility is a huge stressor. Figuring out how you're going to pay for college or your college loans back, figuring out how you're going to pay rent and make ends meet, particularly in the tri-state area in New York City, it's just so expensive. So I could see how it would be nice for, a partner in a relationship to completely turn that responsibility off and give it to somebody else. And what I would encourage them to think about is, if you felt that was a huge responsibility that was difficult to manage and stressful for you, that you want to turn it over to somebody else when it was just you, imagine putting that stress and pressure on a single individual for an entire family. And, think about the impact that's going to have on them. And if you could release some of that stress and also know what your financial situation is, I've had conversations with friends of mine who are professionals who went to graduate school, beyond just college, they had these great jobs and, made good money and they were taking care of themselves for years before they got married. And now it's all the pressure is on, their spouse. And they are like, oh, I can't buy this, I can't buy that. It's annoying that I have to ask for his permission. And it's not necessarily always asking for permission. Sometimes it is, and that's, equally wrong, but it's also that the money's just not there, and you need to make sure that what you're seeking to spend, that there's money there to pay for it. And I have a friend that I'm thinking about in particularly where, she's the one who is like, we can't spend this, we can't spend that, because she manages the money. And it's a huge responsibility. So if you guys can share in that responsibility, it will make it so much easier, I think, for both of you. Being in the dark is never a good thing. And I'm sorry that was long-winded. So
it was great. Yeah. So far I've got financial date night and put yourself, I love this, put yourself in the shoes of, this is great advice. If it was hard enough on your own, how do you think the person feels in the family, right? Doing it, if they're all on it. I think it's great. Paige, what do you got to say?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's not surprising. I think everyone should engage in the conversation about having a prenup or a postnup.
Yes, that is such a great point.
And I think that inherently involves then discussing, where's the money, where are paychecks going to get deposited? Where are joint expenses going to get paid from? And you'd be surprised. We have a lot of clients come to us who say that, we agreed we're going to get a prenup and these are our goals. And I say, okay, great. So what did you guys discuss about, how expenses will be paid? Well, we didn't talk about that. Okay, great. Then we're going to talk about that now. But it's something that, as you're planning your wedding, as you're thinking about, whether you're going to move together into a new apartment or a house for the first time, you make those decisions and don't always sort of peel back a layer to talk about the mechanics of that. And it's important, right? Because some people may assume that all income is going to get pooled while their partner is assuming that, no, I'm going to make my money and pay my expenses, and you're going to make your money and pay your expenses. And so that is, in terms of, leading into having a financial date night, that would be, you know, a good way to start, is to talk about how we gonna manage these very basic things.
Well, I think those three things right there are the key that everybody needs to make sure. On top of being involved, these are ways that you can, you know, make sure you potentially have more of a chance of success, right? Regardless of whether you're on your own or in a marriage. Those are all great tips. So we are good on questions. We've answered everybody's questions for today.
Great.
Is there anything, first of all, I just want to also say to anybody who's watching also on Facebook Live, we do record this and it will be posted to our website, so you can always share if there's been content in here that you found especially useful or you think somebody else will find useful. We will be posting it and sharing it, so please feel free to share it as well. And we also know that sometimes, even though we can't see you, even asking a question in anonymously in a format like this might be scary. We are available. Any of us are available. Paige and Lauren and Stacy are all available offline to answer any questions, and we can put you in touch with the right people. So I think one of the things that I am taking away too from this personally is that you have to have a lot of good people in your camp when you're going through a transition in life, regardless of what that transition is. And making sure that you have the right people is important, and it will save you emotional, right? And financial stress potentially. That's where I would leave it. Do you guys have anything, one last thing you want to say before we hang?
I thought that was perfectly put.
We spent a year interviewing 150 women who had gone through divorce in the New York tri-state area.
Wow.
And we asked them, what were your 3 mistakes that you wish you didn't make and that you would advise your girlfriend not to make? Number 1 was, I wasn't involved with the finances and I was totally unprepared. That's number 1. Number 2, exactly what you just said. I didn't have a team, and I desperately needed a team to get through this because it was much longer and unfortunately much harder than I thought it would be. And number 3, I shouldn't have waited so long. I've been wanting to do this for years, and I feel so much better now. So those were the 3 things that they shared, and I thought it was just really powerful and vulnerable, but loving and wonderful to share too.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's amazing. Those are so true. Lauren.
Yeah, no, it's just, we understand like the financials can hold you back, but there's no future event that is worth waiting for to be happy. And that's, if you're in an unhappy marriage, it's not going to be possible for you to lead the happy life that you want to lead, you know? And so the best thing to do is to move forward with it, and get a team behind you, who can support you through it, you know, and you know, and if kids are holding you back, your kids will be fine, you know, if you get a team behind you and you do the divorce the right way. They'll probably be better off for it because they know if you're unhappy. So, you know, I think, you know, what Stacy is saying, that you think nothing should hold you back from finding your happiness or from getting out of an unhappy, and especially if it's a abusive relationship, nothing should hold you back. You'll figure it out. You know, and that's how our firm feels. Well, we would work with you to do whatever you needed to do, you know, finances aside. So yeah, no, I think that was really heartwarming, and you could see, Stacy, the you know, soft feelings coming out when you were talking about this, because it sounds like that really impacted you. And as women, we want to be out there helping, you know, people move through, you know, a divorce. So yeah.
This has been so awesome. I've really enjoyed this. And I'm just
Same here.
Yeah.
Great. Stacy, we so appreciate
Very special. Thank you for having me. And
yeah,
kudos to you for having these conversations
Yeah.
Really important.
Paige and Lauren are amazing. They want to be at the, they want to just promote everybody understanding that it really takes a team, whether it's them or somebody else, just make sure that you have the right team.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
That's it for this week's talk.
Yeah.
Yay.
We hope to see everybody later
Yeah.
on our next
Thank you so
one.
much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Thank you, Stacy, for joining us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.